You're listening to the free audiobook Much Ado About Chouchou. A story composed one very hot evening when I really couldn't be bothered. Narrated by ElevenLabs, written by Lefki Karantoni, copyright 2026, all rights reserved. Chapter 1, The Crucible of Snowdonia. It was a Tuesday afternoon and the nation of Wales was melting. The Met Office had reported a staggering 28 degrees Celsius. For the seasoned residents of the Snowdonia Massif, this was not weather, this was a targeted geological strike. Sheep stood immobile, panting like asthmatic pugs, whilst the local pub had run out of ice by 9 in the morning. High on a craggy incline sat a thatched cottage of dubious structural integrity. There resided Marie. Marie was 68, a retired teacher whose 35-year tenure in the school system had equipped her with the survival instincts of a mercenary and a glare that could vaporize a vaping Year 9 from 50 paces. Her daughter had moved to Benidorm 3 years prior due to severe lack of discipline. Her personal trainer had made it his life goal to teach her, therefore he followed her there. Marie had retired to the mountains for peace, quiet, and watercolour painting. She had achieved none of these things due to the presence of Chouchou. Chouchou was ostensibly a cat, specifically a Persian mix with a coat the colour of a grey thundercloud, a face that suggested he had smelled something offensive and that the offensive thing was Marie. He was evil, not the charming, mischievous sort of evil that knocks pens off desks, but a deep, systemic malice. Marie was seated in front of an easel in her living room, wearing a floral swimsuit and a pair of red wellies, a sartorial choice dictated by the heat and a recent wasp infestation. She was attempting to paint the valley below. Sweat pooled in her collarbones. "Dreadful," Marie muttered, dabbing a viridian blob onto the canvas. "Looks like a radioactive broccoli." "It does rather lack a focal point," a dry, aristocratic voice agreed. Marie froze. The brush hovered half an inch from the canvas. She looked around the empty room. Her gaze slowly tracked down to the cat, who was draped over a radiator. He reminded her of a hairy, malevolent scarf. "I'm having a stroke," Marie announced to the canvas. "The heat has poached my frontal lobe." "Your parietal lobe is perfectly fine, though your grasp of atmospheric perspective is offensive to the eye," Chouchou said. The feline did not move his jaw much. The syllables slid out of him with the haughty disdain of a West End theatre critic. "That sheep resembles a cotton wool ball that has suffered a blunt force trauma." Marie, operating on the pure reflex of a former deputy headmistress, snatched a damp sponge from her water pot and hurled it at the animal. It missed, ricocheted off the mantelpiece, and struck her squarely between the eyes with a wet smack. Chouchou sighed. "Pathetic! Even your ballistics lack nuance." Chapter 2, The Critic on the Hearth. By Wednesday, the temperature had climbed to an ungodly 28.2. Marie had spent the night sleeping with her head inside the chest freezer, wedged between a bag of frozen scampi and a Viennetta. When she emerged into the glaring morning light, Chouchou was sitting on the kitchen table, delicately licking a paw. "I've decided not to paint today," Marie declared, asserting dominance over the hallucination. She poured herself a cup of tepid tap water. "I'm ignoring you. You're a manifestation of dehydration." "A wise choice," Chouchou replied, not looking up. "Given what you did to that sunset on Monday, the artistic community requires you to take a sabbatical. Tell me, Marie, when you mixed that appalling shade of ochre, were you aiming for dusk or jaundiced liver?" "Right, that's it!" Marie roared, slamming her mug down so hard the handle snapped off, leaving her holding a useless ceramic ring. "I've disciplined teenagers who brought homemade fireworks into the chemistry lab. I'll not be bullied by an animal whose primary diet is mashed fish." She lunged at the cat. Chouchou, who knew what he was doing, leaned 2 inches to the left. Marie's momentum carried her across the floor, where she slipped on a rogue puddle of defrosted freezer water, careened into the Welsh dresser, and brought down an avalanche of decorative plates. A plate commemorating the wedding of Charles and Diana shattered over her head. "Bravo!" Chouchou drawled, peering over the edge of the table at the wreckage. A performance of startling kinetic energy. Slapstick, of course, is the lowest form of wit, but one must applaud the commitment. "I'm going to turn you into a muff!" Marie gasped from the floor, spitting out a shard of royal porcelain. Chapter 3. The War of the Watercolours. Thursday brought no relief from the blazing sun, nor from the feline art critic. Marie, now sporting a bruise on her forehead and wearing a wet tea towel on her head like a Bedouin traveller, decided to fight back using the only weapon she had left: art. She dragged her easel out to the back patio. If he hated her landscapes, she would force him to watch her paint a masterpiece. "Observe," she commanded, flourishing a size 10 flat brush. "I'm employing the wet-on-wet technique." Chouchou trotted out, finding a spot of shade under a dilapidated lawnmower. "Oh, God! Wet on wet! Have you no shame? You are not Bob Ross, Marie. You lack the perm and the inner peace." Marie violently swiped a streak of cerulean across the paper. "It's expressionism!" "It's an assault," the cat retorted. "Look at your wash. It's drying in streaks. You have the brush control of a caffeinated gibbon. Why are you adding cadmium yellow? Are we on Venus?" "It's the sun!" Marie shrieked, dancing from foot to foot on the searing paving slabs because she had forgotten her flip-flops. "It's a blistering 28 degrees, you demon. It's an interpretation of the heat." "It looks like scrambled egg yolk," Chouchou sniffed. "And your horizon is slanted. If one were to walk into your painting, one would slide out the left side of the frame." Marie let out a feral, wordless cry. She snatched up the palette of watercolours and frisbeed it at the cat. It sailed over the lawnmower, missed Chouchou by a foot, and struck a passing crow in mid-air, leaving the bird concussed and magenta. "Your temper," Chouchou noted, "is as poorly composed as your foreground." Chapter 4. The Audience Arrives. By midday the heatwave had peaked. The air was thick, shimmering with mirages. The argument on the patio had escalated from biting art critique to a full-blown screaming match about the very nature of existence and Marie's life choices. "If you're so brilliant," Marie hollered, standing on a garden chair to make herself look taller, waving a tube of burnt sienna, "why don't you paint it? Let's see you grip a brush without opposable thumbs, you sanctimonious furball." "I do not need to lay an egg to know if it is rotten," Chouchou yelled back, the first time he had raised his voice, standing on his hind legs. "Your work lacks soul. It is pedestrian. You belong in a craft fair in a village hall selling coasters to tourists." "I have a degree from St. Martin's." They must have been running a charity initiative. Neither of them heard the crunch of hiking boots on the gravel path. Liam was 18. He was participating in his Gold Duke of Edinburgh award. He was suffering from heat stroke, having taken a wrong turn at Bethesda 3 hours ago, and just wanted to refill his Nalgene bottle. He staggered around the corner of the thatched cottage and froze. There, on a patio, was an old woman wearing a floral swimsuit, flip-flops, and a wet tea towel on her head. She was standing on a chair, threatening a cat with a tube of paint. "Take it back," she bellowed. "Never," the cat meowed back. To Liam's heat-addled brain, it was a furious string of yowls, but Marie was responding as though she were on BBC Question Time. "Excuse me," Liam croaked, his voice cracking. Marie whipped around so fast she lost her footing. The patio chair gave way with a tragic crack. Marie plunged downward, flailing, and landed inside an empty tin bird bath, wedging her bottom firmly into the metal bowl. Chapter 5. The Masterpiece. Silence descended upon the Welsh mountain, broken only by the buzzing of a confused wasp. Liam stared at the elderly woman wedged into the bird bath. Marie stared at Liam, her dignity having evaporated somewhere around the 25-degree mark. Chouchou sat down and began to wash his ears, adopting the innocent, wide-eyed demeanour of a normal, non-speaking cat. "Are you all right, miss?" Liam asked, backing away slowly, convinced he had stumbled into the lair of a mountain witch. "I'm quite well, young man," Marie said with dignity, despite the fact that her knees were adjacent to her ears. "My cat and I were discussing post-impressionism." She glared at Chouchou. "Tell him, Chouchou." Chouchou stared at the boy, let out a pathetic tiny mew, and rubbed his head against the leg of the easel. "You bastard," Marie hissed. "I just need some water," Liam whispered, "and maybe an ambulance. For you. Or me. I don't know any more." After Liam had hurriedly filled his bottle from the garden hose and fled down the mountain at a dead sprint, leaving his compass behind in his panic, Marie finally managed to roll onto her side and kick herself free of the bird bath. Exhausted, defeated and bruised, she crawled over to her easel. She picked up a brush. Without thinking, fueled by spite and heat, she began to paint. She didn't paint the valley. She painted Chouchou. She painted the evil coming from his whiskers. She painted the heat of the Welsh summer. She painted the shattered royal commemorative plate. 10 minutes later, she dropped the brush. Chouchou leapt onto the easel tray, sniffing the wet canvas. For a minute, the cat said nothing. Finally, Chouchou turned to her. "The composition," the cat murmured, "is actually quite striking. The juxtaposition of the watering can against my undeniable majesty. It has a certain brilliance." Marie sighed, sinking onto the grass, feeling a cool breeze rolling off the summit. "Thank you." "However," Chouchou added, jumping down and heading for the kitchen window, "your shading on my tail is amateur. It's like a burnt sausage. Now, open a tin of salmon. I'm parched." The end. Thank you for listening to Much Ado About Chouchou, a story composed one hot evening when I really couldn't be bothered, written by Lefki Karantoni. If you'd like to explore more of her work, visit www.lefkikarantoni.com.